Hi, everybody. And today I have the great pleasure to interview Palak Patel, whose cookbook called Food is Love is, I have learned one big lesson, which is do not look at a cookbook this good when you are hungry, because you see all the Post-its. I already have like a ton of Post-its on this book. I cannot wait to cook from it. Palak, welcome. It's great to talk to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And, I want to start by reading something on the cover of your book, which is this. Food can nourish us physically, but cooking and eating also allow us to connect with our loved ones, express our affection for others, care for ourselves, and celebrate life. For Chef Patel, cooking is the ultimate act of love. Tell me about that.
Oh, I have a really funny story. So I was born and raised in India, and we lived in a multi-generational household. So I grew up with 14 of my relatives we lived in a three-story home. So if you can imagine cooking and kind of feasting together was just the way of life from a very early age. And when I was writing this cookbook, a lot of those memories and recipes came into the book. And I think it was my editor that asked me, she was like, "Oh, well, how do you say I love you in your language?" And I stopped dead in my tracks because I was like, I, I don't know. So I then further investigated, and turns out I'm from West India. In our native language, we don't have a word for love and I love you. However, food was very much a way that we showed love, and I always had a meal. My mom still cooks for me, so the idea of food being love is how the cookbook and the idea behind the cookbook came to be.
What a beautiful story. That's really amazing because, um, as you know, our campaign, Share and Pair Sundays, and our upcoming campaign, Come Over October, are also based on that idea, based on the idea that food and wine are the foundations of affection, of love, of generosity, of friendship, all of those factors that bring us together with other people. I'm wondering, yours is a plant-based
Mhm.
cookbook. And if anyone is thinking, oh, I don't know, plant-based, I just have four words for you. Cardamom peach buttermilk cake, which sounds so good. I think it's going to be the first recipe that I make. But I'm wondering if you've got lots of soups and stews and recipes based on dal and lentils. I'm wondering if you have a go-to wine, just in general.
I have a preference of drinking one single varietal over all others, and that's champagne. I will drink champagne with anything, morning, night, day. I am a big champagne consumer. I think bubbles are a way to life, and what an effervescent, thing in a bottle. So yes, I preferential to champagne.
I can see that because, first of all, I share that love, but I'm thinking that, so many of your recipes are reliant on a combination, actually unique combinations and traditional combinations of spices, many of which are kinesthetic, right? They not only have a flavor, but they have a kind of movement on the palate. And of course, champagne has that too by virtue of the bubbles. So I'm imagining that texturally, that's really interesting.
Yeah, years ago, I spent a little time after culinary school in the south region of France, and Carmenere, which is a grape from there. I did get that right, correct? Carmenere, or is it Cahors?
It's Cahors, but that's
Cahors.
okay.
Yes, and I paired that with like a vindaloo sauce, and they actually really go very well together. which was a very surprising discovery given usually reds don't hold up well, but that particular red held up really nicely to some of the spice notes in and the smoky peppers in the vindaloo sauce.
Mm, that does sound really quite incredible. Um, you know, all of your recipes are they not only incorporate a lot of flavor and a lot of spice, but they're not boring. They are very bold recipes. And I'm wondering if you are ever in a restaurant where you just say to yourself, you know, this could use a little kick.
Yes, that is, but that's my personal statement. I grew up with a lot of spices, so I think my palate is very trained
Mm,
and appreciates flavor. Now, that to say, when I lived in France, of course, it's a very different cuisine. It's beautiful. It's very nuanced and delicate, and I appreciate eating there. But I promise you, at the end of the week, I'm craving something that's got a little heat. It's got a little body and bite to it. So I think it's just you always grow back or go back to the way you grew up and the kind of palate training that you had in your early years.
mm. How did you develop a palate, both for food and for wine?
With food, I spent my formative years with my grandmother, my mom, and I had two aunts, and we all spent time in the kitchen. I was the oldest out of the eight kids that lived in this multi-generational household, and my job was to carry the little tote bag to the market. We didn't have a refrigerator, so this idea that you would actually hold food for days just didn't exist when I grew up. So, we'd go to the market, get what you needed for maybe a day, day and a half. And when you cook that up and ate it, you'd go back to the market again. So I got these early memories and training of just kind of being around food. When I got out of grad or undergrad, I really wanted to go to culinary school, and my parents were very against it. They were like, "No, we want you to go into business. It's a very immigrant thing, go work the ranks, and get a corporate job." And I did, but in the back of my mind, I was like, well, I can move the farthest away from Atlanta to California. And so I took a job in San Francisco, and I was like, well, they can't control what I do there. So I moved out there. I got trained to be a personal chef there, and I was doing that as a moonlighting career on my off hours, and really opened myself to the world of wine and food and farmers market. And for the first time in my life, I was really understanding and appreciating food the way I had never before in my life. And I have to thank San Francisco for that.
Hmm, beautiful story. You know, um, I don't think many people realize that we're only a generation away from not having refrigerators. And I remember my own early days in Spain as a journalist. My boyfriend's mother would go with whom we ate his with his family every lunch, which was the big meal at 2 o'clock or so. And they had a very small refrigerator, but she had grown up without a refrigerator. And so she went to the market every day. And even though there was a very pristine, small little white refrigerator, she actually never used it because in her thinking, in her behavior, you only bought what you were going to consume for the day, and it was and you cooked it that day. So there was no need for this white box that kind of sat in the kitchen unused.
Yeah. Yeah. The idea of adopting refrigeration was also a very big change from my childhood. And I feel like living in New York, I went back to that because, some of my apartments have had the under the refrigerator um, small, refrigerations and a freezer. Um, and now I just have gotten back to just buying what I need and keeping a few of the staples around. But I like that way of cooking and living because it just ultimately forces me to go to a farmer's market or just explore getting something different and trying a few things without worrying about what's in my pantry and what I need to use up.
Right. I think one of the barriers perhaps for Americans um, when they're cooking Indian food, and I realize that this is like saying Asian food, like what Asian food? It's a big continent, and India, much larger than Italy, but like Italy, is very regionally specific to the cuisines. So when I say Indian food, forgive me, I understand that it is very regionally specific, but I wonder how essential grinding your own spices is. It must be for you, but do you think any of these recipes, if someone just couldn't bring themselves to buy a lot of spices and then grind them fresh, how much of a diminution in flavor would there be with store-bought spices?
I talk about this in the book. I think there's no shame in box spices. I, for one, use them. My mother uses them. If I had it my way, using spices is better than using no spices. For that reason, um, take the help. Take the help. It's there. And box spices have come a long way. Spicevala, um, who is Chef Meherwani's company, they make some beautiful pre-blended spices, and the jar is fairly small, so you can consume a little bit and not have to worry about, a large, extra large quantity of spices. A couple of tricks if you are using box spices to make sure that you give them a little heat in the pan before you add in your liquid. And that heat just gently wakes up the spices. Similarly, if you're the grinding process, the heating and the grinding is just that. It releases the essential oils and all of that flavor that's locked into the spice pods. You're just trying to wake it up, and a little time in the pan right before you throw in the tomato paste or any of the liquid will do similar tricks. And
Yeah.
sometimes even the microwave for like 10 seconds, that will
Hmm.
just give it a little heat, and then you sprinkle it on top and you're good to go.
Hmm. One of the things I like about your book too is that there are a lot of simple recipes, including just for unusual snacks. And I mean, one of the things that we talk about with Share and Pair Sundays is the idea that it doesn't, you don't have to make the 12-course meal or even the 3-course meal. Just inviting friends over for some nibbles in the kitchen and maybe putting out a few bottles of wine and letting people choose, that it's really togetherness that matters. And that must matter to you because you even title your chapter heads about emotion. You title them with emotional ideas. Tell us why you did that.
I When I was writing the concept for the book, I started to, I think the one question editors will ask, why this book and why now? And to differentiate kind of the cookbook from the other cookbooks and really make it my own, I started to think about the relationship I had with food. And most of the recipes or stories I was always telling people had to do with some emotion or some memory of I was here, I was doing this, we were celebrating this. And it just started with that. It was these emotions that I was carrying through when I was storytelling. And I thought, what a great way to carry the chapters in the cookbook and then take readers on a journey. Because to me, food does say a lot. If I give you soup when you're sick, I am essentially saying, I care about you. Here's something comforting that is going to make you feel better. And so just calling those chapters exactly in the title of that emotion worked really beautifully in tying up the recipes.
It really does. I mean, I was looking at your chapter on comforting foods, and they are all built around an idea and emotion that is very comforting. But it struck me too that wine and food are are ways to travel at a time when it can be hard to travel. Um, Mumbai grilled cheese just might get you there.
It's true. There are moments in time that get imprinted in our memories through smell. The hypothalamus is very powerful in carrying out and opening the memory box of our brain. And smell sounds are great ways to transport yourself into a place, whether you're sitting in a piazza in Italy or, the countryside of France or the bustling streets of India. Those memories can be very quickly harnessed through those smells and tastes. So if you do taste a spice or a pasta that you've had somewhere in the world, it's going to take you there. And even if you haven't been, just that smell or that like awakening of the palate will allow you to just travel for a moment in time. And that's what I think food and wine are such a beautiful combination of doing those two things beautifully.
They certainly do. Well, Palak, thank you so very much. And the book is so well titled.
Thank you.
Food is Love. Thanks for talking with me today. Happy Share and Pair Sundays coming up in a couple of days.
Thank you. I will be joining that.
Thank you.